Brad Thor has spent the past quarter century entertaining readers with his thriller novels that feature former Navy SEAL and Secret Service agent Scot Harvath. Now he's teamed up with another best-selling author, Ward Larson, to co-author an absolute blockbuster. It's called Cold Zero, which publishes next Tuesday, February the 10th, and Brad Thor joins us now. Brad, great to see you as always. Thanks for your time.
John, it's always great to be back with you. Thank you for having me.
This is awesome. I mean, I've read it not once but twice. It's a great story, great characters, and bravo. You have done great work, but I think this is zooming to the top of your list.
It's really, really cool. I've never done a co-authored book before, and so I had this idea that wouldn't fit into the normal Scot Harvath universe, the character that I write a book a year for Simon & Schuster. And so I went to them and said, "Hey, I've got this really cool idea, and I'd like to do this as a co-written thing. Would you let me explore doing it if I can find the right writer?" And I'll tell you, I had a list of 10 people. Only one of them had a Scandinavian last name. That was Ward Larson. So it was a slam dunk at that point. Thor and Larson.
How does that work? I mean, I know you can't alternate sentences or you can't alternate paragraphs, but how does co-authoring a book work?
Well, so there's two types of writers in our world. One is an outliner, called an outliner. The other one's called a pantser, where they fly by the seat of their pants. And Ward and I are both pantsers. So what I did is once Ward and I decided to we agreed to work together, I had three different ideas. And Ward said, "Listen, before you tell me the ideas, I want you to know that as a former fighter pilot and a current commercial airline pilot for Southwest, I really would like it if the idea incorporates airplanes somehow." And I went, "Okay, that's simple. I have always been in love with this concept I had of a commercial airliner because we're starting to see more and more commercial routes going over the North Pole. We've never lost a commercial aircraft up in the Arctic." And I thought, wouldn't that be a cool thriller? A commercial plane goes down and then there's survivors. And I thought, how do I dial that up as a thriller author? And I said, what if there was a piece of tech on board? There was a scientist who was defecting to the West with a CIA team. And so now there's a rush to get to the crash site of the Chinese, the Russians, and the Americans. And I said, "Ward, that's what I want to do." He said, "That's fantastic. Let's do it." And then as pantsers, once we knew what the book was fully about, we said, "Okay, we're going to do the first 10 chapters. You do this, then I'll read it, then I'll do this, and I'll put it back over the net to you." So it was really like a game of tennis. So we weren't writing at the same time. If one of us wasn't writing, you were editing. So one would write, the other would edit what had been written, and then we'd switch positions, if that makes sense. We just go back and forth. One writes, the other one edits what that person just wrote, and then you become the writer, and they edit what you write.
You have another Scot Harvath thriller coming out later this year, but was this kind of a breath of fresh air for you to bring out another character, Casey Sheridan, and almost kind of develop another character and maybe move forward with her?
Yeah, it was fantastic. You know, I never could understand why people were so crazy about Pablo Picasso. I used to look at Picasso's stuff as a young man and think this is garbage. I never thought Picasso was a talented artist until I traveled to Barcelona and I went to the Picasso Museum and I saw his classical work. Things that were like Rembrandt and Vermeer and things like this, and I realized, oh my gosh, he's really a talented artist. And what he developed his style later in life, it was just so different. So it wasn't until I saw the stuff he started with that I appreciated where he ended up. And I would imagine where Picasso ended up, it was such a breath of fresh air for him. So for me as a writer, I love the thriller genre. I'm not going to go and try to take the cheese off Nick Sparks's burger and start writing romances. But to do another thriller with a fresh set of characters where I'm not tied to a whole history of things my protagonist has done in the past was really refreshing to operate within the thriller space, but I guess if you want to say I got to use charcoal instead of acrylics or something like that. It was a really fun switch up. So yeah, I loved it. I loved being able to do something new.
In Brett Sharp, you have kind of an unlikely hero. I mean, the guy served his country, but he's just doing his job. And then he is thrust into the situation that develops. I don't want to give too much away. But again, unlikely hero, kind of a centerpiece along with Casey Sheridan.
Yeah. And so one of the discussions that Ward and I had going back and forth on this is exactly how much would Casey Sheridan, as the CIA operative, how much would she share with Brett Sharp? She knows a lot about what's going on the ground, but she has to complete her mission. And where do her loyalties lie? Is it to the mission, or is it to the other survivors of the aircraft, of the crash of the aircraft? So that was a really interesting thing for us to play with. And then as Brett Sharp, who's extremely smart, starts figuring stuff out, and maybe she's not telling him the truth, how does she handle that? And what duty does she have to him? So that was a very interesting thing for us to play with as we wrote this book.
You set a previous Harvath book in the Arctic. It was 2021's Black Ice. We hear a lot of talk now, and you mentioned it before, about international travel over the pole and up in the Antarctic. What drew you to want to feature it again after you had it in one of Scot Harvath's books?
Well, being the young whippersnapper that you are, you probably are not going to get this cultural reference because it's way before your time. But there was a black and white movie called Ice Station Zebra years and years ago. I believe it was late 60s. And it was this, is it Gregory Peck that plays the sub captain? No, it was Rock Hudson. Right. It was Rock Hudson, I believe, played the submarine captain, and it's about a Russian or a Soviet satellite that crashes in the Arctic, and the Russians are racing to get there. And I always love that idea of a race to a very desolate place, a couple of superpowers trying to get there first, and that the place is so dangerous that for us with the Arctic, the cold actually becomes a character in the book. Yeah. So this idea of the Chinese, the Russians, and the Americans all racing there to get that piece of tech that could shift the balance of power in the world. That for me was really exciting. And as you said, I did the Arctic back with Black Ice, but it really is in the news all of the time now. And I think the Arctic, we are going to not only hear more and more about, but my big concern is that if we do end up in another world war, I think that's where the first shots are going to break out.
You made the announcement on the Today Show earlier this year. The book is being adapted into a movie with some heavy hitters involved. You've been working a long time on projects to do this. So how did that come about, and how excited are you to see this happen?
I'm thrilled because the book, my agent said, we've got the perfect producing team for this. It's Pete Berg and Ezra Emanuel. Pete's a producer director. Pete did Lone Survivor about Marcus Luttrell, the Navy SEAL team in Afghanistan that gets attacked, and there's only one survivor, is played by Mark Wahlberg. He did one of my favorite thriller movies, The Kingdom, with Jamie Foxx and Jennifer Garner back in 2007. He did the movie Friday Night Lights, developed it for TV, and as you and I discussed off air, Pete did the series that's on Netflix now called American Primeval. He's amazing. So Pete has been down in Australia wrapping a movie for Netflix called The Mosquito Bowl, which is all about a bunch of NFL football players that after the attack on Pearl Harbor signed up to become United States Marines and were in Australia getting ready to ship out to Iwo Jima and have their last football game. And so Pete's partners, Ezra being one of them, said, Pete, we got a peek at Brad Thor's new book. We need to buy this book. This is your next movie. And Pete goes, well, that's great. I'll read it when I get back. They said, no, Pete, you need to read it now. And Pete goes, guys, I don't read books while I'm on the set making a movie. And they said, Pete, if you don't read Thor's new book, we're going to lose it. Somebody else is going to get it. Pete loved it, reached out to us, said, I want this to be my next movie. And I said, okay, who do you think is a screenwriter? And he goes, have you seen the True Detective series? And I said, wait a second, season 1 with Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson, and then season 2, Colin Farrell. And then the last season 5 is in the Arctic up in Alaska with Jodie Foster. I said, I love those shows. So Pizzolatto is going to be our screenwriter. And we sealed that deal right before Christmas, put a bow on it as we all were joking in our offices. And so now Pizzolatto is writing the screenplay for that, and then Netflix will take a look at it. They'll budget it out, but already everybody on the team and inside Netflix is calling this a bigger, better, bolder Hunt for Red October.
How much input will you have in the process? Is this once you sell the book, do you lose all creative opportunity, or will you have some input as it goes along?
So I'm an executive producer on it, and I will. they're going to pay me the courtesy of letting me read the screenplay. And so if I see anything technically that is not in keeping with the way it would work in the real world, or if Ward sees something, we'll suggest it to him. But my job is going to be chief popcorn eater. I hand over the book. I trust these guys. All they do is take films and make great projects, TV projects. They just print money for Netflix. They're so talented. So I'd be silly to try to tell them what to do. So if I notice a technical thing that should be different, I'll call it out. If not, I'm looking forward to being on the red carpet and then sitting in a seat watching it on the big screen.
25 years now of writing and publishing books. Are you still as excited to dive into another story, whether it be with Harvath or Casey Sheridan, and type those last words as you always have been?
Yeah, I love my job. I'm really, really fortunate. It was on a piazza over a glass of wine with my wife on our honeymoon. And she looked at me and she said, "What would you regret on your deathbed never having done?" And I said, "Writing a book and getting it published." And she said, "Okay, when we get home, you need to start taking 2 hours protected time every day to make that dream come true." And now here I am all those books later talking with you.
And it's awesome. Once again, Cold Zero. You left it at a point where you could have Cold Zero 2. Are you and Ward looking at possibly a sequel?
Well, I'll tell you, if I get the actress I want for Casey Sheridan, I will write as many books as she wants, because it means I get to sit on the set with her. I jokingly referred to this as my own kind of a, what do we call, in Chicago, they used to joke around when certain people would hire only from a certain pool, kind of the mutual back scratching. And I joked that I'm running this Scandinavian pipeline in Hollywood. So I got Ward Larson, who's Scandinavian, working with Brad Thor, who's Scandinavian. And if I can get Rebecca Ferguson as the actress in this, I will be one happy camper. So yeah, there's as many books in the future as Rebecca Ferguson wants if she shows up as Casey Sheridan.
Now, well, there's no more Mission Impossible. She was killed off of Mission Impossible, so she's able to do Cold Zero.
Yeah, and I'm a massive fan, so yeah, I'd be thrilled if she. So that's just kind of like my dream board. If I could, she'd be my number one choice to be Casey, is Rebecca.
Well, once again, Brad Thor and Ward Larson have teamed up. Cold Zero. I've read it twice already. I cannot recommend this enough to anyone who's a Brad Thor and a Ward Larson fan. Congratulations, my friend. This is a great book and comes out. Everybody will read it on February the 10th, and by February 17th, you'll be back in your usual place atop the New York Times bestseller list. Thanks for your time, Brad. Always great to talk to you.
You too. Thank you, John.